Welcome to the lecture series Programming in C. In this module, we will be learning the for statement, which is going to be a for loop meant for entry control loop, and we will be learning about the jumping statements that are used to change the control of the for loop. So, we will be covering the looping statements, especially the for loop, jumping statements and the examples relevant to the looping and jumping statements execution. We have already learnt in the previous session that the looping statements are the statements which are used for executing a set of statements repeatedly. If we want to execute a set of statements n number of times, we can go for executing the looping statements. There are three types of loops: do loop, while loop, do while loop and for loop. The body of the loop will be the set of statements which we want to repeat, and the control of the loop is the condition wherein we will be checking for the condition for terminating the loop. And we will now focus on the for loop. In case of the for loop, we will be using this particular flow chart wherein we will have three parts of the for loop: initialization part, condition part and increment or decrement part. The initialization part of the loop will be executed only once. In the flow chart, we can see it will be executed only once. Then the condition will be checked. If the condition is true, we will be executing the body of the loop. If the condition fails, we can go to the next statement after the loop block. So, this is how the iteration will be carried out. If the condition is true, then after executing the body of the loop, we will be updating the increment or the control variable. So, let us see with the for loop syntax that the initialization part will be executed once, then it checks for the condition as the second step. If the condition is true, it executes the body of the loop. After completing the body of the loop, it will be updating the expression by incrementing or decrementing. After increment or decrement, it again checks for the condition. If the condition is true, the same process will be carried out for n number of times. And one important thing with respect to the for loop is that for loop is executed for known number of times. It means that if we know the number of times the repetition has to be done in advance, then we can make use of the for loop, because in the condition itself we will have to clearly state what is the criteria for terminating the loop. For loop can also be considered as a sort of while loop, where these three parts, the initialization, condition and the increment or decrement part, all these three parts will also be available with the for loop, while loop. So, here the initialization part will be given outside the while loop and we will be using the while loop, then the condition or the expression 2 will be checked with the while loop, and if the condition is true, it goes ahead with the statement execution. Then the third expression, that is increment or decrement part, will be there with the while loop. So, a for loop is also a sort of while loop. There are even other ways of writing the same for loop. The initialization part can be taken out of the for loop, so that only the condition part and the increment or decrement part can be given as a part of for loop. The first part of the initialization part is moved out of the loop, so that here we are supposed to just mention a empty semicolon, mentioning that that part is already given in the or given before the loop. The second case is we can leave off the second, that is expression 2, the condition part. The condition part can be given as a part of if statement inside the for loop. So, this is also an accepted way of using the for loop. Then if the third part, that is a increment or decrement part, need not be mentioned in the for loop statement, again the empty part should be mentioned with the empty semicolon. The increment and decrement part can be a part which can be given inside a for loop. So, remember the initialization part should be given before the for loop and you can miss it out in the for statement. The expression 2 condition part should be checked with the help of an if statement inside the for loop if the part is missing in the for statement. The third category is the increment and decrement part has to be given as a part of the for loop. So, here we can see some example statements of the for loop. The first statement, initialization part is 7 and the criteria or the condition checked is less than or equal to 77 and the increment part is said to be I plus equal to 7. The second for loop start with the initialization part to be 20. The third one starts with 10 and fourth one is also starting with 10. The condition may vary according to the requirement and here also we can see the third part, we can also see some decrement part. Here in the last for loop we start with the control variable to be value 10 and then we are keeping it decremented for every for loop until it becomes 0. So, this kind of the decremental loop is also allowed with for statements. We will see some examples. I want to print a message 5 times. So, what is the for loop I am supposed to give? For I start with the initialization part of the control variable to be 1 and then I check for the condition. So, what happens? We have already learnt that the initialization part will be executed only once. So, I value is set to be 1 for the first iteration and now I check the condition 1 whether it is less than or equal to 5. The condition is true. If the condition is true, then we execute the body of the loop which displays the value to be hello. So, the first hello string is displayed, after which it goes to the incremental part. Now, the I value is incremented by 1 which becomes 2. So, we are now checking it against the value 5 which is also true. So, we go for executing the body of the loop which displays the value of the string hello. Then we again move on to the increment part. So, now I value becomes 3, we are checking with the condition 5 which is again true. So, we also again for the third time we display the value hello. Then we again increment the value of I to be 4. Now, we are checking with the condition 5 which is again true. So, the fourth string hello is also displayed. Then we again now increment the value of I to be 5, 5 less than or equal to 5. So, in this case the condition equal to is also satisfied. So, the condition is true, it executes the body of the loop for the 5th time. And now, we increment the value of I to be 6, we are checking 6 less than or equal to 5 condition, the condition becomes false. Henceforth, the loop will now be terminated and so it is displaying the value of the string for the 5 number of times. So, in case, so here the value or the number of times which we want to display is given in the as a part of the condition. Supposing if we want to get the value from the user or get n number of times what we want to display or what we want to operate from the user. So, we can even get that as a input from the user. So, example 2. So, here we can see that total number of times, how many number of times we want to display or we want to operate the loop can be get as a string or input numeric value from the user. So, here we can see scanf percentage %u ampersand total times. So, we are asking the user to input or give the value as now total number of times, and then we use the for loop and we check the condition for total times. So, for the first execution, if I am supplying the input of total times to be 3, then this loop will be executed for 3 times and we will be getting the message displayed for 3 times. If for the second execution, if I give the value of total times to be 10, then this value will be replaced with 10 and now we will be able to get the display of the message 10 times. So, we can see here the for loop is used for printing the message n number of times, where n is of user's choice. And the third example is to find the average of n numbers. So, we will outline this as a small algorithm. We will find out how many values are there as a first step, and then we will add up all the values, then we will divide the sum by the number of values or the count of the values, then we will display the result. We will see here as part by part. The first part is we will have to find out the number of values, how many number of values we are going to enter. So, this part you can see that we are printing the message as how many number of values are you going to enter, and we are reading the number of values as a integer to read from the user that how many number or how many count of values that they are going to enter. Okay. Then as a second step, we need to add the values then and there we read from the user. So, this for loop will allow us to start from the current value to be 1 and we are checking with the current value against the number of values, and the current value is incremented by 1 every time. So, if the condition is true, we will be executing the body of the loop, where the body of the loop is we are just getting what is the next value you want to add up to the sum variable. So, this value is now read as value, and that value is added with sum on every iteration until the current value becomes number of values on increment. Okay. Supposing if we give number of values to be 5, so this whole for loop will be executed for 5 number of times, and on every iteration we will be getting a new value, and the new value is added to the variable sum. And the last part of the program is to display the average. So, after computing the sum value, we will be dividing the sum value by the number of values. Number of values already we have got from the user. So, that you can use for calculating the average. So, once the average is calculated, it can be displayed using the printf statement. So, this is how a for loop can help us in finding the average of n numbers. The n value is of user's choice. Then, as we have learnt in the previous sessions against the while and do while loop. So, for also supports nesting process, in the sense that you can have 2 loops, one serving as the outer loop and one can serve as the inner loop. The inner loop must have a different name for its counter variable. We cannot have same counter variable name for both the loops, because it will be misleading, and since we are incrementing or updating the control variable at every iteration, the control variable of inner loop and outer loop should be different. So, here we can see an example. This for loop with control variable I, this is the outer loop. So, the outer loop is set to be executed from 1 to 3, and the loop with the control variable j is what is called the inner loop. So, generally people will use a notation I and j in case if it is a nested for loop, but of course, we can change the control variable's name as we want. So, here this inner loop is said to be executed for 2 number of times, that is 1 to 2. Okay. So, the inner loop will be executed for 2 times, the outer loop will be executed for 3 times. Henceforth, this complete nested loop will be executed for 2 into 3, that is 6 number of times. So, we can get the output, we can see that the output is displayed 6 number of times. Yes. So, this is one more example which will be able to clearly understand how the inner loop is executed and outer loop is getting executed once the inner loop completes its iteration. Now, here we can see that the inner loop runs from 1 to 10 and it displays the value I into j, right. So, for the first iteration the value of j will be 1 and the value of I will also be 1. For the first iteration I take I value to be 1, outer loop's value. When the I value is 1, j will have to be executed from 1 to 10. So, j will be 1, 2 and 3, it goes on up to j value to be 10. Then only when the j value is 10, the criteria for its loop termination is true. Then it comes out of the inner loop, only then the outer loop gets incremented by 1. Now, again the j values counter variables value will keep changing from 1 to 10. Now, after reaching the value 10, the outer loop value will be incremented by 1, then it again starts its execution of the inner loop with j value to starting from 1 to 10. Then I value becomes 4, again the value of j will be 1 set to 2 set to 10. Now, I value becomes 5, the same loop is executed up to 10 times, right. So, when I value becomes 6, the outer loop will be terminated because the condition of the outer loop fails. Outer loop's condition is I less than or equal to 5, which fails. So, it will be terminated. So, this is how a nested for loop will get executed. The inner loop will be executed only when the inner loop completes its iteration, the outer loop's control variable will get incremented. So, this is how the nested for loop works in C. Yeah. So, we can have a small exercise. What is the output of the following nested loop? As we have learnt the nested loop now, the outer loop will be executed 4 number of times, the inner loop will be executed 5 number of times. We can consider that the inner loop to be the row value and the outer loop will be the number of times displayed. Yes. Do you really need a nested for loop in this case? Because we can see here that it displays a value star or asterisk. So, the inner loop will be executed for 5 number of times. So, for 5 number of times the asterisk will be displayed and then the I value will be incremented, it displays again 5 stars, it again displays 5 stars, it again displays 5 stars. So, totally we need to have 20 stars displayed. So, for displaying continuous 20 stars, we do not need a nested for loop at all, because the operation of both the for loops are the same. So, here we do not require nested for loop at all. Then, so this is how the output will be. So, here we can see the nested for loop with outer loop to be of 6 iterations and inner loop to be of the number of it depends on the number of the outer loop, the number of times that it should execute, inner loop should execute depends on the control variable of the outer loop. So, in this case we may need the nested for loop, because the control variable of the inner loop is dependent on the value of the outer loop or the control variable of the outer loop. So, here we are checking the condition as j less than equal to I. I is the value of the control variable of the outer loop. So, only when we have 2 loops here, we will be able to correct, or we will be able to get the actual display as in the screen, saying that for the first line it displays only 1 star, for the second line it displays 2 star. The number of asterisks that are displayed, that depends on the number of iterations of the outer loop. So, in this case we may need a nested for loop. And there is one more example. So, here we can see the output, instead of just asterisks we can have the numerals also to be displayed using the nested for loop. So, how to do that? Instead of just a star, we can make a note of the control variable displayed in the. So, we can get a pyramid of the numbers displayed using this particular for loop. Then we will move on to the next part of the session, jumping statements, break, continue and go to statements. These are the 3 statements which are used to change the control of the program from one part to the other part, especially in a loop. Okay. I want to break the loop in between. I just want to have a different way of execution when the number of iteration is 3. So, here we can break the loop if the number of iteration becomes 3, or the control variables value. I have to actually execute 5 number of times the for loop, but in between if the value is going to be 3, I can break the loop using break statement. So, this will terminate the loop at when the value of break statement can also be used in a switch statement, wherein the for every switch case, if the case is true, the statement will be executed, and for every case we need to break the case using break statement. And the reverse part of break statement is continue statement. In case if we want to continue the loop again intentionally, we can use continue statements like this. This is in the case of while statement, this is in the case of do while, this is the case of for statement. And this is one example. So, here we can see that in this case we are using a for loop, and the for loop says that initialization is 2 and it checks with the square root of n, and we are just breaking the loop if the n mod I value is equal to 0. An example of a continue statement, we are using a nested loop with the control variables to be m and n, and here we are checking if the control variables are equal, we are continuing the loop. It means that only when both the control variables are the same, we are going to do some process. Sorry, only when the control variables are different, we will be doing the process, or otherwise the loop execution continues. And there is one go to statement, where irrespective of the presence of the loop's control place, we will be able to change the control to different location or different position in the program using go to statement. We have to mention the go to statement with the go to and some label. So, this is what is called backward go to statement, and this is forward jump. In case if the jump statement or the go to statement makes the loop to be reversed or go back, then it is called reverse or the backward jump. In the case of moving forward, if the label is going to be in the after the execution of the loop, if you want to continue keep going with the statements, we will be using the forward jump. So, here we can see the forward jump and backward jump statements. So, go to label, the label will be in the in the futuristic declaration of the statement, then we can say that as a forward jump. If the label is declared before the go to statement, then we can say that as the backward jump. Here we can see one example for the usage of go to statement. So, here we are using the go to statement with the label end. The label end is already defined in the last part of the program. So, here the jump statement leads to the last part of the program, henceforth it is forward jump. In case if the go to statement has a label say odd or even, which are in the prior part of the program, then we can even want to move in the reverse way, in the reverse direction also it is possible by backward jump. So, this is one more example of having the jump statement with the label start and end. Here we are checking for the value of I, we are reading it from the user and we are checking with the value of I to be whether it is equal to 5. If it is equal to 5, we are moving to the end. If it is not, we are moving to the start statement. So, this is how the jump statement is used to move forward and backward according to the requirements. So, summarizing this session, we have learnt on the looping statements, especially the for statement. Also, we have seen about the nested for statement, where we will have two loops. Inner loop will serve as the one which gets executed for the when the outer loop is on the first iteration, and when the first iteration of the outer loop is over, then it moves to the inner loop again. So, it keeps continuing the nesting process on execution of the for loop. For loop is executed or used when we know how many number of times we are going to execute the loop, how many number of repetitions are going to be there. If it is defined, we can make use of the for loop. And we have also learnt the jumping statements, break, continue and go to statements, which are used for changing the order of execution or changing the flow of control from one part to the other with the help of break, continue and go to statements. We have also looked into the examples relevant to the execution or relevant to the illustration of the for loop and the jumping statements. Thank you so much for listening to this particular session on for loop and jumping statements. Thank you.